Am I the asshole for not inviting my daughter to my wedding? I, 46-year-old male, and getting married to my fiance, 39-year-old female. We have been together for 3 years. I have 2 daughters, 18 and 19, from previous relationships. My fiance is a very sophisticated person and has very exquisite tastes. She also doesn't really care for young children, and this has created tension between her and my youngest daughter. While our plans have been delayed due to global circumstances, our plans to get married are finally going ahead. It's going to be a very lavish and expensive wedding. Due to the nature of the wedding and my fiance's preference, our wedding is also going to be child-free. We will, however, be inviting my oldest as she is no longer a child, and because, unlike my youngest, her and my fiance get along well. However, I didn't realize that my youngest expected to come to the wedding. She tried to tag along with my fiance and oldest when they were going dress shopping because she thought she was going to need a dress too. I explained to her that the wedding was going to be for adults only and that she wouldn't be attending. She started crying and getting mad, which stressed out my fiance. She has been distraught about this for days and hasn't let it go. My parents came by to visit one day and my youngest told them what happened. When they asked for clarification on the situation, I explained to them that my daughter wouldn't be attending the wedding because the child-free rule applied to her as well. Besides, this wedding would not be suitable for a child and I don't want my fiancé to have to deal with my daughter on the most important day of her life. Oh my gosh! I had to reread that shit. My parents told me I was being a terrible father by prioritizing my fiancé over my daughter and that on the day of the wedding they would take my daughter out for a special day, which means they wouldn't be in the wedding. I told them that they couldn't do that. Even if they didn't attend the wedding, I wouldn't let them take my daughter. This has become a bigger conflict than I intended. Can I roll my eyes farther back? My fiancé and I both think we're in the right for wanting a child-free wedding, but it appears I may lose my parents from the wedding over this, and I want to know if I am the right or not. So, am I the asshole? No, you're not the asshole. You're the dumbass. You're just a complete dumbass. Like, man. What? You stupid piece of shit.
Am I the asshole for telling my wife she embarrassed me by bringing a meal to my work? I, 33 male, recently got hired at a large company in the South, where me and my wife moved months ago. My wife was excited for my new job and talked about preparing a surprise for me, which got me excited, but I didn't know what it was till she showed up at my workplace 2 days ago with a meal she said she prepared, specifically for me since it's my favorite. Apparently, this was her surprise. I was a little upset she brought it to my workplace. My coworkers, who are vicious and brutally honest and sarcastic, got involved and kept teasing me about the meal. One of them joked about how mommy is so supportive by bringing food to my workplace. I felt like shit as he and other coworkers kept laughing at me. I went to work the next day and Austin kept making jokes about me saying shit like, is mommy going to bring lunch today as well? And when is mommy coming to change your diaper?
Is this fucking middle school?
One of them said, I can still smell the meal my name's mom brought yesterday. She's such a great cook. Bless her heart. And the goddamn giggles kept on. I felt so awful. I went home and just blew up at my wife, telling her she flat out fucking embarrassed me and just torpedoed any goddamn prestige and respect I had among my coworkers. I told her what Austin and others have been doing and asked if she was happy for giving them ammo to come at me like that. She argued that she was just trying to do something nice for me and didn't care about what people might say, but I was a selfish jerk who only cares about what others think rather than how she felt by my constant berating over a meal she put effort, money, and time to make and bring me. The argument escalated after I suggested that she could have waited till I got home to surprise me with this goddamn meal instead of showing up while I was working, which made me seem unprofessional. She said she came during lunch break. She said at this point, I clearly find it easier to blame her than stand up for myself. I said I don't appreciate what she said, but she replied that I should be grateful she cared enough to bring me a home-cooked meal, then thanked me for showing her it's not worth wasting any more of her time cooking for me after this. I told her to stop blaming me for something she caused and asked her to admit that maybe she should have consulted me before bringing the meal over so I could avoid being the goddamn butt of every joke. She told me to man up and either report them or quit then. I was floored and I had to walk out because I couldn't take anymore and felt like she wasn't listening to how her behavior caused me an issue at work. But it goes edit to say that I in no way don't appreciate my wife's efforts. That the only problem I have is that she didn't tell me beforehand about whether it was okay to bring the meal over to my workplace. I really preferred that she waited till I got home. I agree that the main problem I have is my coworkers, but I lashed out because I felt overwhelmed with their hurtful remarks that offended my wife as well.
He doesn't appreciate it. He can say it, but he doesn't.
Couples therapy or call it quits. Whew.
I wish we had a wife write it.
Am I the asshole for wearing white at my blind cousin's wedding? I'd like to start by saying that me and my cousin, who was blind from birth, aren't very close, but we get along well as relatives. She sent me an invitation, though we don't talk as much, but since I wanted to take a break from work, I decided to go. My favorite color is white. I love wearing white because it brings out my skin glow and makes me feel comfortable and confident. I purchased a maxi white dress, nothing fancy, but goes well with my skin tone, and wore it to the wedding. There wasn't a big party with many guests, but sort of family dinner and small celebration. I really thought no one would even notice I was wearing white. My cousin and her husband obviously didn't know because no one told them. But my aunt kept giving me uncomfortable looks the entire evening, and so did my other cousin. Once I decided to leave, my aunt pulled me aside and berated me for wearing this color at her daughter's wedding. She said that just because her daughter is blind doesn't mean she's stupid and doesn't know what's going on around her, basically saying I brought negative energy and disturbed the celebration by having guests notice and by extension my cousins as well. She gave a lengthy lecture and asked if I hate to see her daughter happy and whether I pulled a stunt because my blind cousin got married before me. I was like, whoa, calm down, none of this was true. And married before me? I never thought of that. I just wore my favorite color and didn't do it because my cousin is blind and wouldn't notice. I argued with my aunt for trying to dictate what I wear, but she defended herself saying I was a guest and should have respected the bride. I left feeling very upset and exhausted from that encounter. My boyfriend said he believed I used the fact that my cousin is blind to wear white, but this didn't fly with her family. He pulled the I told you so line and said I just made my family hate me with that stunt. Even though he knows I always wear white, but he warned me that if my cousin finds out there's going to be some issues. He suggested I get ready to apologize, but I really see no reason to apologize since I chose to wear a comfortable color that I feel confident in. So am I the asshole for wearing white to her wedding?
Storytime about how my boyfriend almost ruined my relationship with my sister. So a little background information. I was 16 and I was a sophomore in high school at the time. Well, we're gonna call my boyfriend Alex. And whenever Alex and I first started dating, I would literally brag to all my friends about how nice he was, about how he treated me so good. Well, fast forward a few months, him and I were still dating. And originally my sister scared him. But eventually he had been around long enough to the point where they were super cool. Well, after that, I started realizing some off things. For example, the one night he was texting me, and all of a sudden he just stopped responding. And I knew that he didn't fall asleep because he was still texting my sister. Well, that should have been the first red flag, but as we know, I am blind to seeing red flags. Anyways, I didn't want to seem jealous of my sister, so I just decided to play it cool and act normal. But him, on the other hand, like for part 2. Part 2 of how my boyfriend almost ruined my relationship with my sister. So like I said, I decided to act normal and not be jealous. But him, on the other hand, he started finding reasons for him not to like me, and he was ignoring me. Like, he was just being very standoffish. So the one day my sister decides to leave her phone open on the couch when she goes to the bathroom, and I had this fantastic idea to go through her phone. Rightfully so, like, sis, don't be texting my man more than me. That's weird. Well, when I looked, there was nothing. He was just being super nice to her. And with me, on the other hand, his texts were super dry. By the way, my sister and I are twins. But she starts laughing at her phone, and I'm like, what did he say? And they were just typing random letters to each other. She has a better sense of humor than that, so I knew something was off whenever she was laughing at it. And then she says, I have something to tell you, but you have to promise me you won't get mad. And then she tells me that he said that he likes her. Well, after being mad at her for a while, I realized it was his fault.
Am I the asshole for catfishing my underage sister on Tinder and humiliating her in order to teach her a lesson? Last week, I was using my younger sister's phone because mine was dead and I needed to call a friend. Dialing my friend's number, I saw a Tinder notification of some dude messaging her. Immediately, I asked her why she's on Tinder. She's 17, and she grabbed her phone back and said, none of your business. I decided as her big brother that I wanted to have a little fun with this. I wanted to give her the benefit of the doubt. Maybe she's just swiping for fun, so I didn't want to go straight to ratting her out to our parents. To test if she was just using for fun, I decided I was going to make a Tinder profile of someone else and message her to see if she responds. I asked a good friend of mine from back in college, who happens to be a male model, if he'd mind if I use his pictures and explain the situation. He thought it would be hilarious and told me to go for it. I created the account, set my age to 22, set my swipe radius to a mile, and quickly found my sister's account. Her age was set to 19. Lie, she's still in high school. So I was definitely more suspicious of her now. I super liked, and less than an hour later, she matched and messaged me. I decided to set up a date to a fancy restaurant downtown for Sunday afternoon and told her we could head to my place afterwards. She was completely receptive and said she'd meet me there. She told our parents she was hanging out with one of her track friends and spending the night at her place. After she left, I told our parents everything and showed them all of the messages. They were pissed, and I suggested we all go to the restaurant. My dad and I just went instead and saw her sitting at a table alone, all dolled up waiting for Jim. My dad went up to her and said, Jim's not coming, and she screamed and asked what we were doing there. I told her there was no Jim and that it was effing stupid of her to try to be meeting grown men on Tinder at that age. My dad harped onto that and lectured her about lying and meeting strange men on the internet and being so willing to go back to a stranger's place. We were a bit loud, so people were starting to look at us, and my sister eventually bursted into tears and ran out. I told my friends in a group chat the situation, and they all agreed it was hysterical, except two of my female friends who said I was an asshole and cruel to her. My other friends defended me and said she needed to be taught a lesson. Now I've been wondering who's right and maybe if I went too far.
Story time about how I saw my boyfriend propose to another girl in front of me. So a little background information. At the time, my boyfriend and I had been together for around 4 years. We had 2 kids together, and our relationship was pretty rocky. Within the first year of us dating, he would cheat on me all the time, and both times that I was pregnant, he would cheat on me also. Now, after I popped out the second kid, our relationship was going pretty well. And if you're wondering why I didn't leave him when he was cheating on me all the time, well, it was mainly because I grew up in a broken home. And remembering how hard it was on me whenever my parents broke up, I didn't want that for them. Well, over the past few months, my boyfriend had been traveling all over the country with his dad, going to meetings and stuff because he was getting ready to take over half the company. Well, fast forward, it's a Thursday, and my boyfriend has a meeting with some associates who flew in from out of state. And later that night, we were supposed to get on a flight with our friends to go to the Bahamas. Like for part 2. Part 2 about how my boyfriend literally proposed to another girl right in front of me. So like I said, my boyfriend had a meeting with some associates who flew in from out of town. And that night we were supposed to be on a plane to the Bahamas with our friends. So while he was getting ready for this meeting, I went and I dropped the kids off early, and he went to this meeting, and I drove our luggage over to our friend's house because they were just going to drive us to the airport. So my girlfriend and I are super pumped to go on this trip. So we decided to start drinking early, and we went somewhere to get drinks. She suggests this high-end place because the guy at the bar has a crush on her and always gives her free drinks. So we're sitting there having a really good time drinking at the bar. So while we're sitting there, we hear a bunch of clapping and cheering coming from outside. So us being drunk and nosy, we go out there to see what's going on. And what are the chances I walk out there and my boyfriend is down on one knee in front of another girl? And I'm not very confrontational whenever I drink, so I told my best friend to just take me back to her house. When we got back, it was around 6 p.m. and my boyfriend tells me that he's just going to meet us at the airport like for part 3. Part 3 about how my boyfriend proposed to another girl right in front of me. I know this is late, but better late than ever. So like I said, we left, I went back to her house, and my boyfriend has the audacity to text me, "I'll just meet you guys at the airport." So my best friend's like, "What do you want to do? Do you want to go beat him up?" Of course I said no, so I told her and her boyfriend to just go to the airport while I figured out what I was going to do, and to not say a word. Which was hard for my best friend because she was confrontational as fuck. So I texted my boyfriend saying that I was sick and I just wasn't going to go to the Bahamas with them, when in reality I was packing up our whole house, leaving him with only his clothes and his shoes. So I put all the stuff in storage and I just decided to move back to my mom's house. And yes, this was in a span of a few days. So the whole time that he was gone, I was acting like everything was okay. On the last day of the trip, I sent him a text saying that I knew about everything. And I said I never wanted to hear from him again and I never wanted him to see the kids again. And he took that quite literally. I never got a text back. Well, 4 months after all this happened, I soon find out that he got a new house in North Carolina with his new wife and they have a daughter on the way.
Story time on how my sister married our stepdad after our mom passed away. Okay, so boom. My sister and I are like best friends since we're only 1 year apart. We have the same mom and dad, but my mom divorced our dad after catching him cheating on her. About 5 years later, my mom met our stepdad and got married, and we've been a happy family ever since. So me and my sister started off very close, but our relationship became strained when I noticed my sister and stepdad being way too close. I never caught them doing anything, but their relationship was inappropriate. But it always happened behind me and my mom's back. I only seen them sneak off a couple times when they didn't expect me to come out my room while my mom was at work. But it was only very long hugs and kisses on the cheeks that I seen. Unfortunately, my mom got sick and ended up passing away due to an incurable problem. Me and my mom were super close, and all my mom asked our stepdad to do is take care of us alongside our real dad. Little did we know, like Part 2 on how my sister married our stepdad after our mom passed away. Okay, so boom, like I said, my mom got sick with an incurable problem and just asked our stepdad to take care of us alongside our real dad. Then my mom passed away in peace. But little did she or I know the chaos that would come behind her death. By the way, you guys, I'm 16 and my sister is 17. Shortly after our mom passed away, the energy shifted in the house. It was just negative in there and I just felt it. My sister started sleeping in bed with our stepdad where my mom once laid her head. And of course I knew what was going on in there. Who wouldn't? One day I was so enraged by my sister's actions, especially after our mom passed away, that I barged into their room where I seen balloons, hearts, and roses everywhere. I then saw my sister crying as she happily held her hand up and said, "We're getting married." I got into a screaming match with my sister and how she could do this to our mom, to where she responded, "Mom's not here." It's only been 5 months. Part 3 on how my sister married our stepdad after our mom passed away. Okay, so boom, like I said, my sister happily held her hand up and said, "We're getting married." We argued and I told her how could she do this to mom. And she responded, "Mom's not here anymore." It's only been 5 months, guys. I was so angry. I couldn't hold myself back. My sister was older, but I was bigger and taller, and I beat my sister up until our stepdad broke it up. My sister had a huge black eye, and before I left, I spit on my stepdad. I know it's nasty, guys, but you don't understand the level of anger and disrespect I felt for my mom. I called my real dad, and once I explained everything to him, he went inside and grabbed my sister away from our stepdad. The dads went to war, but my real dad ended up winning. And then he called the cops. My stepdad groomed my sister and engaged in unlawful acts with her. He's currently in jail where my sister visits him all the time. My sister is convinced she was not groomed and that they were in love. She even says she'll wait for him. She'll be waiting a long time. I'm just glad that I was able to get justice for Storytime on how I read my little sister's diary and found her fantasizing about me. Okay, so boom, jumping right in. My little sister and I have a great relationship. I'm her big sister and I protect her from all her bullies and always have her back in any situation. My little sister is 13 and I'm 18, but one thing about my sister is she gonna write in her diary. Literally, she's obsessed with jotting down every single thing that happens in her life. Well, recently, my sister has been acting a bit different. She's just been so distant, and I feel like she's been pushing me away. Me being a worried big sister, I asked her if she's having trouble at school, but she told me she's fine and closed the door on me. So, since she wasn't telling me anything, I waited until she went to volleyball practice and snuck into her room. I took her diary, and I know I shouldn't do it, but I couldn't help it because I really felt like my sister was having trouble at school. But what I found in that diary changed our sister relationship. Changed for the worse. Like for part 2. Part 2 on how I read my little sister's diary and found her fantasizing about me. Okay, so boom, like I said, I snuck into my sister's room, and even though I know I shouldn't, I took her diary and I immediately started reading it. Everything seemed normal at first, talking about her teachers and her friends, but nothing about bullying. And some things here and there about our parents. But when I flipped to the next page, there was a picture of me with the title, My Beautiful Sister. At first, I smiled thinking my sister really loves me. But after I really read through it, I found out my sister really loves me. She wrote about how my skin was so soft and how every time she looks at my lips, she wants to kiss me. She even wrote about how I smell so good and a lot more weird, crazy, too far things. I closed the diary and ran to my room and just freaked out. It all made sense why my sister's been acting so weird. She's been fantasizing about me. Like for part 3. Part 3 on how I read my little sister's diary and found her fantasizing about me. Okay, so boom, like I said, after I found out that my sister was fantasizing about me, I needed a game plan because I felt like that would just be too weird to tell my parents. So what I did was start being mean to my sister, and I kept sneaking into her room to read her diary every day to see if she would stop. And it worked. She stopped after about 4 months. Thank goodness. She started saying things like I can't stand my sister and how I'm spoiled and how I'm full of myself. Oh, but I didn't care. She even started writing about a new boy that she liked in class. And I was even more relieved. Thank goodness. Well, my sister hates me now, but at least she doesn't fantasize about me. Yikes. This is why you shouldn't marry a professor. Okay, so boom. My husband is a professor at a university and he loves his job. Maybe a little too much. So my husband is 50 and I'm 40, and lately he hasn't been wanting to be intimate with me at all. He's been coming home from work way later than usual, saying that he's tutoring some students. Well, I decided to cook my husband's favorite meal and surprise him for working so hard. I went to the university and opened his classroom door, and I couldn't believe my eyes. His classroom was empty, but I did see his car in the lot, so I went over to see if maybe he was just heading home. Well, when I went back downstairs, I was happy to see his car was still there. The car looked like it was shaking a little bit, but it was dark, so I just wasn't sure what was going on. I walked over to his car, and there it was. I was in complete shock. Like for part 2. This is why you shouldn't marry a professor, part 2. Okay, so boom, like I said, I opened his classroom door and it was empty, but I did see his car downstairs, so I went back downstairs. I was happy to see his car was still downstairs, and it looked like it was shaking a little bit, but I just didn't know what was going on because it was a little bit dark. Well, I walked over to my husband's car and there it was. My husband was in the backseat of his car with a student and obviously not tutoring. And to my surprise, his student was a 23-year-old boy. and some back actions were taking place, child, if you know what I mean. I was so shocked, I dropped the food and I ran and went home. I didn't even give my husband a chance to react. He begged me not to leave him and said it was nothing and that he loved me. I obviously divorced him, and can you believe he's still with that same student now? Child, like for part 3. This is why you shouldn't marry a professor, part 3. Okay, so boom, like I said, I caught my husband in the backseat of his car with a 23-year-old boy, which was his student. He begged me not to leave him and said that he loved me, but I obviously divorced him because, like, whoa. At the time, I was hurt, but I genuinely got over it because at least he's living his truth now. I, on the other hand, finally had the kids I always wanted at 42, and I'm happily married with my new husband that's so in love with me. Stay away from them professors. Story time on how I beat up my grandma. Yes, my grandma, you heard right. Let's get into it. Okay, so boom. I'm a 16-year-old high school student who finds myself at my grandma's house almost every day. My mom's a single mother and works 2 jobs, and instead of leaving me home alone, she always drops me off at my grandma's house. And this has been our routine ever since I was 5 years old. My mom just felt more comfortable leaving me at my grandma's house. But what my mom didn't know is that I'd rather stay home alone rather than going to my grandma's house. My grandma has been beating me up ever since I was 5 years old. She didn't beat me up for any valid reasons. She would just be mad at me for the smallest things. Like one time I broke her glass chandelier while I was playing with my ball and she hit me. Another time I broke her 50-inch TV by accident and again she hit me. Y'all wouldn't believe this third reason why she beat me up. Like for part 2. Part 2 on how I beat up my 76-year-old grandma. Okay, so boom, like I said, my grandma would always beat me up for the smallest things. None of her reasons were valid. She beat me up once for breaking her glass chandelier while I was playing ball. Another time I broke her 50-inch TV screen on accident and she beat me up again. She even would tell me to wash the dishes, and when I would tell her no, because I don't live here, I shouldn't be washing anything, she would once again beat me up for being quote-unquote disrespectful. All this hitting throughout the years and I was just over it, and my mom always sided with my grandma. Well, I'm 16 now and I was over it. My 76-year-old grandma should have learned to keep her hands to herself. So this particular night she told me to study, but I didn't want to study. I wanted to watch TV, so I told her no straight up. And things escalated like for part 3. Part 3 on how I beat up my 76-year-old grandma. Okay, so boom, like I said, my grandma told me to go study and I told her no, I wanted to watch TV. She said she was sick of my slick mouth and made her way over to hit me. But this time, oh no, I wasn't going for it. I pushed her away from me, then I punched her on her arms and her face. She fell down and started screaming in shock that I even hit her. Once my mom came home, my grandma told my mom what happened and my mom beat the living soul out of me. And my mom told me if I ever raised my hands to my grandma again, she was going to do more than just hit me with a belt. Truth is, my grandma never hit me unless I was rude or broke something, and that happened very often. Come to find out, I actually suffered from aggressive behavior in children and needed to get treated. Thank God I got treated and I'm better now, and me and grandma has a great relationship now. Don't beat up your grandma. Story time on how my parents sold me for a cow and goat. Okay, so boom, we jumping right into this one. So I'm an only child and my parents are farmers. My parents would always tell me how they were going to expand their herd and that I would be the one to help them. I never understood how though. I assumed that they were going to teach me how everything works and I'll eventually take over like a family business. But boy, was I wrong. On my 13th birthday, I was excited because I was going to the village to celebrate. Or so I thought. My parents actually brought me to an elderly man who I never met. The old man then examined me and smiled and gave my parents a thumbs up. Then they started debating on how much cows and goats I'm worth. And I just stood there completely confused as to what was going on. After my parents and the old man were done going back and forth about cows and goats, they came into a conclusion. Like for part 2. Part 2 on how my parents sold me for a cow and goat. Okay, so boom, like I said, my parents and the old man came into a conclusion on how much I was worth. They settled at 8 cows and 6 goats. Then I was married off against my will to become this man's 8th wife. I cried and told my parents, please no, but they told me that I should be grateful because I was still young and desirable. And I cost the most right now, which is making them grow a large herd. So when my parents were telling me I was going to be the one to help them, they never meant that I was taking over the farm. They were speaking about literally selling me. I was the youngest out of all the wives, so I got the most attention from my now husband. All of the other wives were like 16 and 20, so it's not like they were old or anything. And now at 14, I'm currently pregnant, expecting my first child. And I'll make sure my baby is never sold. Story time on how my mom told me she wished she never had me. Okay, so boom, jumping right in. Question, you ever had a mom who loved you, motivated you, and respected you? Yeah, well, can't say the same for me. My mom is a single mother that had me at a young age and is currently in college. But the thing is, my mom hates me. And you know why she hates me? Because I have a relationship with my dad. She's mentally abusive and sometimes physical. She tells me how she's disgusted with me and how I should worship her since she brought me into this world. And when I was younger, she tried to get me to hate my dad and even use me as a weapon against my dad. But my dad ended up putting himself on child support and doing shared custody. Well, I had a birthday party when I was turning 16 and my dad paid for everything. My mom kind of just showed up. And on my birthday, I was about to hear one of the most hurtful things a mother can say to their daughter. Like for part 2. Part 2 on how my mom told me she wished she never had me. Okay, so boom, like I said, I was turning 16 and my dad threw me a birthday party where he paid for everything. And my mom kind of just showed up. She gave me really bad energy and I tried to ignore it, but later that night, I walked into the restroom looking for my mom and she was in there with her friend. And that's when I heard her say that she should have aborted me and that she wished she never had me. I cried my eyes off and my mom didn't even care when she found out. My dad ended up getting full custody and I haven't seen or spoken to my mom ever since. Now I'm at a better place and I'm happy living with my dad and my loving stepmother and sister. Sometimes someone hurt is so deep rooted it places hatred on people who's undeserving. She hated my dad for leaving but for staying with me. And that's something that she's eventually gonna have to come to terms with. But I refuse to let her bring me down. Now I'm loved, happy, and elevated. Stay blessed, y'all. Story time on how me and my dad walked into my mom sleeping with my brother. Yes, his and hers biological son. She actually took his virginity away, child. All right, let me set the scene for y'all. I was 18 at the time and my brother was 16. My parents were together, so we lived with both parents. Me and my brother went to the same school, but I was in a girls' basketball team, so I would always stay after school and he would take the bus home. And my mom would be home by the time my brother got home. 3 to 4 hours by the time my basketball practice was over, my dad would be getting off of work, so he would pick me up and we would go home together. So that was basically our routine as a family. But one day, this routine changed because I sprained my ankle. I called my dad and he immediately left work to come and get me. My ankle wasn't too bad, but my coach wanted to send me home to be on the safe side to make sure I heal. Well, that night changed me and my dad's lives forever once we opened that door. Like for part 2. Part 2 on how me and my dad walked into mom was on top of my brother riding that pony. It was disgusting. My jaws dropped. My mom jumped off covering herself and my brother sat up shaking. My dad went off. He went straight for my mom and grabbed her yelling, "What the fuck are you doing in bed with our son?" Not gonna lie, my dad was so angry he put his hands on my mom. My mom fell to the ground crying, saying, "I'm so sorry." Then my dad turned around and beat my brother's behind. My brother ran to the room and I'm just still standing there in shock. I grew a hatred for my mom that day. My dad started yelling at my mom saying how she's taking advantage of their son, how he's a minor, and all she did was cry. All of a sudden, I don't know what came over me, but I called my mom a stupid, dirty whore. And the war continued, like for part 4. Part 4 on how me and my dad walked in on my mom sleeping with my brother. So like I said, my mom was on the floor crying while my dad was yelling at her for taking advantage of their son. And at the time, I hated my mom so much I called her a few less than kind words. And she had the audacity to get up and tell me not to speak to her that way. I then called her the B word, the FB word, and the W word, and it was on. She rushed at me trying to hit me, but I ended up pushing her to the floor. Then she fell to the ground saying, "How could you put your hands on your mother?" And my dad responded, "How could you put that cat on your son?" She walked into that one. Anywho, let's fast forward to the legal things. That same night, my dad called the cops on my mom and they came to our house. And they, of course, arrested my mom. Like for part 5 to find out what was her charges and what happened to my brother. Part 5 on how me and my dad walked in on my mom sleeping with my brother. So like I said, my dad called the cops and they arrested my mom. She's facing over 3 years for statutory R and it's classified as a felony. My brother still lives with my dad and I, but he has to go to therapy almost every day. And that's how we actually found out she took his V card away. Anyways, a year later, I'm still not the biggest fan of my brother, but we're okay. And I still haven't talked to my mom, and I'm happy about that. I just think she's weird and disgusting. Me and my dad are great, and he's happy with the new girl, a regular girl. Story time on how my dad had a threesome with my brother and another man. Okay, so a quick rundown. My parents divorced when I was 13, and just a year after, my dad got with another man. So at the time, I was 14, my brother was 15, my mom was 34, my dad was 36, and his boyfriend was 30. Keep up with me, guys. The age is important. My mom didn't want to see my dad or his boyfriend, so this was our routine. My mom would pick us up after school, and sometimes my dad would pick us up. But on this particular Friday, my brother wanted to stay at my dad's, but I wanted to be at my mom's. So my brother left with my dad, and I left with my mom. My mom had late shifts for the weekend, so she ended up dropping me off at my dad's. When I walked inside, I heard moaning, but not from 2 voices. It was 3 voices. I immediately knew something was up. I walked upstairs to see my dad, his boyfriend, and my brother doing the nasty. Like for part 2. Story time on how my dad had a threesome with my brother and another man. Like I said, I walked in and my dad, his boyfriend, and my brother was doing the nasty. My dad was actively sticking his inside of his boyfriend's and my brother was sitting in between the mix. Traumatized isn't the word. They all jumped up, but I ran outside and immediately called my mom. My mom came back so angry, she started throwing a whole bunch of books at my dad. But I just held her back and we all left. My dad ended up getting married to this guy and they adopted a child. My mom got full custody of me and my brother, and my dad isn't allowed to see us anymore. My brother is going to therapy and said that it was forced and that he didn't want to. Do I miss my dad? No. Good riddance. Story time on how I caught my mom cheating on my dad with a woman. Okay, so a quick rundown. At this point, my parents been married for 20 years. They would have little arguments here and there, but nothing out of the ordinary of a regular couple. My dad was a doctor and my mom was a nurse, so my dad worked a lot. But usually when I would come home from school, my mom would be home. Well, this particular day, it was early release, and we all know how that goes. Happy as hell to go home early. Little did I know I was about to walk into some mess, honey. Obviously, my mom wasn't expecting me to be home this early. Well, I opened up that door and right there on the living room couch, y'all, the position she was in. Oh my gosh. It's the audacity for me. Like for part 2. Part 2 on how I caught my mom cheating on my dad with a woman. So like I said, I came home from school early because it was early release day and my mom wasn't expecting me. I opened up that door and I was literally not expecting anything. But there my mama was. Both legs up, wide open with a woman eating that cat. My mouth dropped to the floor and I screamed, oh my gosh. My mom jumped off that couch so fast and pushed that woman so hard she fell to the floor. She tried to cover herself with the clothes next to her and said, baby, please, let me talk to you. And the classic, say it with me, it's not what it looks like. Child, I ran to my room and I closed that damn door. Like for part 3. Last part on how my mom cheated on my dad with a woman. So they got into an argument after I snitched, and basically my mom was reassuring him how she just wants to be with him and that was just a mistake. The relationship was rocky and on bad terms for about a year, but eventually my parents actually got through it. To be honest, it only worked out because it was a woman. If it was a man, I'm pretty sure my dad would have left. We eventually got over it as a family and I got a little brother. But one thing about it, I will always be traumatized.
The strangest unsolved mysteries from each state. Today, we have North Carolina. This story is called the Below Murders, and it took place in Windsor, North Carolina. Below was the name of the local grocery store, and on a warm June night in 1993, something very awful happened. A murderer hid in the store and waited until closing time, and once the crew started doing their nightly duties and cleaning and closing, he jumped out and held them at gunpoint. All of the employees were bound, gagged, and then brought to the meat cutting room. In there, he stacked their bodies and started firing the gun until he was out of bullets. He grabbed a knife and stabbed each and every victim. One of the injured employees actually managed to get to the phone and call the police before they died. When the police arrived, they were not prepared for what they were going to see, such as people lying in their own piles of blood and a man with a knife in his back. The police actually found this one man that they thought was dead because he was drenched in blood, but he was actually unharmed and still alive. The strangest part is nobody even knows who would have done this or what motive they had. The Below shut down shortly after, and to this day, the police are still trying to find out who did this.